Good afternoon, or no, good morning. See, I am really becoming like Steph.
It's not easy.
It's 10:45 on Sunday, October the 8th. We are heading out for a lovely hike. It is Thanksgiving weekend here in Ontario, and we are just going to be enjoying the glorious Indian summer that we are having. And we thought
Sorry,
our way...
sweetie, can I just mention, I think it's Native American summer.
Oh. Native American summer.
Or global warming, whichever
you prefer. Just to be politically correct. And so we just thought that we would do a podcast on our way to this hike. We've never been to this place before. So we have no idea how much time we have. But we
really don't have much idea. And here you'll see, I actually got a post on the board the other day from our good friend Greg. And he was saying that in my podcast on masculinity, the You Are Essential podcast, that I was caricaturing masculinity by talking about certain aspects that are considered to be kind of common. And the funny thing is, of course, all of those are things that I do, but you will see the one exception to it in this morning, which is that we don't know where we're going, and you will probably, about a third of the podcast will be me whining or bleating about not knowing where we're going, and Christina coming to the rescue. So you'll see some pretty non-typical male behavior there. There'll still be some scratching, which is why we're just doing the audio. But that's mostly on Christina's part. No, just kidding. Never. Could never happen. She is a lilac. Sorry. See, I said this was going to be her show, and already I'm steamrollering over. It's not a show. Just a chat. Sorry, sweetie, go ahead.
He really is a gem. I do absolutely and totally adore him. Anyway, I smacked.
I know. We've noticed as I've begun to weed out my you-knows, Christina has begun to add to the chat. So you'll hear some of those, but not to panic, not to worry. Everything will be fine.
The reason that we're doing this podcast today is so that I can share some experiences of my own with the faithful listeners of Free Domain Radio about DeFooing. I haven't seen my parents in almost 2 years. I think the anniversary date of the last time I saw them is coming up at the end of October. And it's been a real struggle. It's been a real struggle for me. It's not an easy process. I completely empathize and sympathize and have a great deal of compassion for those who are going through this process. And recently, I received a letter from my parents. They've tried to contact me maybe a handful of times in the last couple of years.
And the way that you defooed was with a letter.
Yeah, yourself. And I defooed with a letter after a series of things that happened. I don't necessarily want to go into all of that, but
they called me bald. I know. It's not true. I have a fringe. I have tufts.
You do have tufts.
Which are leaping energetically up this morning.
Anyway, they have tried to contact me over the last couple of years via phone messages. I think I've received about 2 or 3 letters, and this is the latest letter.
And that we had a drive-by.
Oh, yeah, we had a drive-by, at least one that I know of. They may have driven by at other times when I wasn't paying attention or looking out the window, or perhaps with a client, or when we weren't home.
Right. I mean, this is very similar to, in certain cultures there's the drive-by shooting. This is the drive-by guilting. It's more of a Greek form of organized crime.
Anyway, they wrote me a letter, so I'm just going to read you the letter. And I think bits of it are very interesting, and those are the bits that I'd like to talk about. Dear Christina and Stefan, hello. Just to let you know, on October the 8th, oh, I thought it was October the 3rd. I guess they're leaving today. On October the 8th, we are going to Greece. So my family's going back to Greece. A couple of friends of theirs and my...
Sorry, just to visit, right, so people know. Okay.
Sorry, just to visit, yeah. A couple of friends of theirs and an aunt and uncle of mine will join my parents for a 2-week vacation to the Greek islands and 1 week in the village, their friend's village. After which the 4 of them, the friends and the aunt and uncle, will be returning to North America, and my parents will be staying on for a few more weeks. They've only purchased one-way tickets, and my uncle my father's brother will look after our house and water the flowers while my parents are away. Now, that would typically have fallen in my hands whenever my sister lives halfway across the country, so she wouldn't be able to do it, obviously.
Across the country.
Completely across the country, yeah, on the other coast. And so that would have definitely fallen in my hands to go by their home, maybe weekly or bi-weekly, to check the mail, to water the plants.
And we would have got the cat.
And we would have gotten the cat, which I adore. I absolutely adore this cat. Anyway, we haven't mentioned the cat yet. Sylvester is our cat. He'll be
no names. Sylvester's gonna sue. Sorry, go ahead. Sure, I can't talk about your patients.
You don't know about my patients.
What patients?
Right.
Thank you.
Sylvester. I love that cat. I just absolutely adore that cat.
He's a very friendly cat.
He's just an absolutely beautiful cat. He's
very good-natured.
He's a rare breed, apparently. Just absolutely gorgeous, big furball, beautiful cat. Anyway,
yeah, see how Christina's very pro fur. It's very hard for me to have the cat around.
Well, given my own mange, I'm kind of
mange. Not mange. I'm the mange. You're the main. You're my mange, darling. Sweetie.
Given my very own mange.
See, this is a good thing I'm driving. Otherwise, we'd have to stop this podcast and just make out what with that kind of proto-romantic babble going on. Anyway, on with the serious letter. This is a serious show.
My little Sylvester is going to be at some animal hospital.
I don't think hospital, is it?
Yeah, it's an animal hospital.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. So okay.
It's an animal hospital, probably with a shelter or some kind of
right.
pet vacation place.
Right.
Anyway, should anything happen to us, please take care of him. That's my parents' request.
And that's the request with the hand on the forehead. Should anything happen to us?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then they go on to say that last May, one of my first cousins visited with us for a few days. He gave us some money from his sister, obviously my first cousin as well. This sister, my first cousin, she used to live here. She lived here for many, many years, about 18 or 20 years. She came when I was 5, and has been back in Greece for a number of years with her family. And I thought for a very long time, I guess we were very close. But the definition that I used for closeness is very different than the definition that I use for close now. But we did spend a lot of time together. Anyway, she sent some money for me. I'm not quite sure what the money was about or what it was for, but she sent some money. And so we kept the euros and are sending you the equivalent in Canadian dollars, check enclosed. And indeed, they have done that.
Did you catch that?
No, actually, I'm going to deposit it this week.
Okay.
Christina, it has been almost 2 years' time since we last saw you, and you said a few months, quote unquote. We have respected your wish, and we will not bother you we have not bothered you other than a couple of just to let you know notices.
Which is not true.
Yeah.
I mean, the last time they contacted you, they wanted something from you very badly. So that's just not, it wasn't the case, right?
Right. Although the suspense is killing us. This is what kills me. This next statement kills me. Ma is very depressed and cries every day. Very seldom smiles. We really, really wish and hope to see you and Stefan, or at least talk to you on the phone before we go. And if we have said or done anything unintentionally that hurt or offended you, please forgive us, as we do not hold anything against you. The only thing that we have for you is love, and only love. Love that comes from the heart. So please, if you can find it being in quotation marks, in your heart, call us. We only want to know how you are. And with that, we wish you and Stefan health, love, happiness, and prosperity, and all your dreams and wishes to come true. With love, Ma and Ba. Ba being the Greek for father.
You know, it's really only coming to me now what a bad daughter you've been.
I'm horrible, aren't I? I'm selfish.
Oh my God, they love you so much. They've done nothing. They only wish you the best. They have only love for you. You see, only love, and they just anything that they did to hurt you was merely unintentional.
Right.
And they they don't want to be intrusive. They just want to know how you are, and how I am, and that they just need a little bit of information. And you said only a few months, and it has in fact been almost 2 years now.
Mm-hmm.
So you got this letter, and how are you with it?
Well, when I first read it, I was emotional because everything that, I mean, they pulled my heartstrings.
Yep.
They did their intention. Their letter had exactly the intent initially that they had wanted it to have. I mean,
and what was that? What was that for you emotionally?
It was horrible. It was guilt. It was feeling wretched about not having seen them for a couple of years. It was. I mean, well, you tell them. What was I feeling? What did you see? What did I express?
Well, you felt guilt. There were some key phrases in there that were very hard for you, of course. The one that I think was the hardest for you was that your mother is depressed, rarely smiles, and cries every day.
Right. I
think that was very hard, and the fact that your father was writing this gives it kind of like independent verification. If your mother said, I cry every day, and this, you'd feel it was manipulative, but your father as a third party writing this on behalf of your mother, it's almost like an appeal from a judge. It's almost like an appeal from a third party. It feels more true when somebody else says something like that than when the person who is crying every day says that. Does that
right?
The fact your father said it was, I think, quite important.
Yeah, it was. It was just. It had its intended effect. It made me feel guilty. It made me feel selfish. It made me feel self-centered. It made me feel like I was responsible for the pain and suffering that they are feeling. And it took me a little while to just sort of reorganize my thinking.
Sure.
To see it for what it really was. And of course, Steph was there to help me through that process, but it is very obvious to me now when I read this letter what exactly is happening. And so what I did was, for my own benefit, and this might be useful for people who listen to Free Domain Radio who might be trying to go through this process, to write a letter outlining your own thoughts and feelings. And the letter, this is something that we do recommend in therapy, to write a letter, an angry letter, a passionate letter, a self-pity letter, whatever comes out, not for the purpose of sending it, but for the purpose of clarifying your own thoughts and feelings, and sometimes using it as a starting point and sometimes using it as an ending point.
Right. I mean, if I understand the theory correctly, sweetie, I think that it's because in these kinds of families, the children don't have a voice. They can't speak their mind. They can't speak their feelings. And certainly one of the things, I don't want to get into any details that you don't want to talk about, but one of the things that occurred for us as a married couple, because we've been married for almost 4 years, and for the first 2 years of those 4 years, we saw your parents regularly. They were at our wedding. We would go over. We went to family functions, extended family functions. I mean, it wasn't a treadmill by any means, but it was something that we were involved in. I didn't particularly enjoy it, but it was important to you, and, those are the things that you do. And, of course, we weren't very, very clear. But one of the things that happened was that every time I sort of pointed out to you that whenever you were around your family, you would sort of check out emotionally and intellectually and spiritually. You would sort of not be there.
Right.
And so basically I would end up, in a sense, I mean, to put it dramatically, I would end up being dragged over to this elderly Greek people's house. They don't speak English that well. They're pretty good. You can sort of see by your father's letter that his English isn't bad, but they're not fluent. And so I'd end up sort of sitting with this old Greek couple that I didn't really have anything in common with other than you, and you would come and not be present. You would sort of space out. And so one of the things that we did, and this is sort of, I think, where a lot of my ideas came from about go talk to your family, was that you began, with my encouragement and support, to try and bring your opinions to your family, right? To have opinions, to think for yourself, to tell them what you thought and what you felt. And what happened for that for you?
Oh, I was completely and totally shut down. Every time I brought up a topic that I thought was worth discussing or voiced an opinion about something that was being discussed. There was either on one occasion, my mother completely said, I don't want to talk about this anymore, and just changed the subject and refused to discuss the topic any further. Other times it was Steph and I were talking about some issues that we were having, and they just agreed with what we said. They didn't offer a different opinion. Do you remember that? We were talking about the house.
Yeah. Well, we think you should. We said, well, we think we could do X, and they'd say, well, we really think you should do X then. And then we'd say, but then there's Y. And they'd say, well, we really think you should do Y then. And it was like, we're kind of looking for a conversation, not just for a blanket reflection of what it is that we wanted. Like, that's not very productive.
What had happened over time in my relationship with my parents was that they started to seek my approval, I guess, in some way. It's very strange. They wanted to please me. They wanted so desperately to please me. So it was maddening.
Yeah, this kind of over-compliance which occurs in relationships. We don't want to talk about anything, and it really is around there can't be two people present at any given time, which is so common in family structures. Like, when you had an opinion, they wanted to sort of figure out what you wanted them to say, and then say it, because they couldn't talk to you and have both you and themselves present at the same time, if that makes any sense.
Exactly.
But then on the flip side of that compliance, which, I mean, as a psychotherapist, can you just explain that for the users? Because I keep getting this term, it's unwieldy, but just so they know.
Okay. My title is Psychological Associate. In Ontario, we have licensure in the profession of psychology is licensed and registered. Not anyone is allowed to call themselves a psychologist. To be a psychologist in Ontario, you need to have a PhD in psychology, and then you have to write an examination and take an oral examination, although I think the oral exam is now it's slightly different anyway, but a jurisprudence exam. Once you've done that, you've had the qualified amount of supervised practice, you can be called a psychologist or call yourself a psychologist. So that's licensure at the PhD level. There's also licensure at the master's level, and that's what I have. And I didn't do a thesis, so I didn't spend 5 years in graduate school. I did 2 years in graduate school, and then I spent 5 years under supervised training. I wrote the same exam. I took the same oral jurisprudence exam, and I'm licensed at the master's level, but the term psychologist is protected and only applied to those with a PhD. So it's very, very difficult for the public to understand this. We are appealing. Psychological associates have their own association. We're trying to appeal that decision. It's been taken to the courts, and this is something that is an issue, I think, across many provinces and states in North America. Some provinces allow people with a master's degree to call themselves psychologists. Provinces or states have different terms. Anyway, that's the gist of it.
Okay, and I sort of wanted to point that out because some people get confused by the fact that I call myself a psychologist, but I actually don't use the P at the beginning. Right, so that does get people confused because that's a registered term.
It
right?
is.
So, when I just generally I find psychological associate to be kind of unwieldy, which is sort of probably what it's designed to be, right? So I say, Christina's a therapist. I can't say psychologist because she doesn't have the piece of paper on the PhD level. But I do say therapist. But I just sort of wanted people to understand that she's gone through some really rigorous training and examination, and she has a continuing education requirement to stay licensed. And it is a state license, and I, of course, that has all of the problems, as you can hear. But that's when I say therapist and so on. But now, of course, I can't remember what the heck I was saying beforehand.
You were trying to say that as a psychologist or someone who practices this profession, I was talking about the...
Oh, yes, I say. You know that the flip side of compliance is aggression.
Yes, it is.
Right, so... Question?
I'm just sorry, directions, interruption. We're looking for Highway 7.
All right.
And we're going to be turning left on Highway 7.
Left?
Yeah.
Okay, because you pointed right.
You know me, I'm dyslexic.
Okay, got it. So real left. All right. Yeah, so that would occur that your parents would comply with certain things that in a kind of empty way, so whatever we would say, they would agree with, which is not really the same as having a conversation at all.
Right.
And then, on the other hand, there would be this kind of aggressive
Right. So
critical.
Right.
Right.
So, for instance, I mean, I would go shopping with my mother, and she would be, "Oh, whatever you want to do, wherever you want to go. Do you want to go into this store? Do you want to try this on?" And just really just over solicitous and really just sickening, like sickening.
Sycophantic.
Yes. Yes.
And of course, this was a real trouble for me because they say that the mother is like the daughter. And so when we got married, I really had my fingers crossed and my hopes set on a similar level of compliance from Christina, but really quite the opposite has occurred.
Isn't that wonderful?
Actually, it is. The last thing you should get sometimes is what you really want.
So I had that, and then there were times when I really wanted to express an opinion, and I would be shut down.
Right.
So the issue around the house, where Steph and I were talking about something that was their desire to make us happy, to comply with us without having really their own opinion or their own thoughts about it. And then when there were other issues around
culture, values, history, like any of the really important, any of the unimportant stuff, they would comply with. But any of the important stuff, they would shut the conversation down.
Right.
Like, pretty, not with raised voices or anything, they're more sophisticated than that, but with a real kind of coldness, a real kind of, this is entirely inappropriate. Like, if we just said something horribly racist among impolite company, they would simply not talk about it. Like, they just would shut that aspect of the conversation down. And so, I do understand it for sure. It really was. I would say that it was kind of brutal, the way in which they shut that conversation down. And cold. And not appealable, if that makes any sense. Like, you couldn't even say, well, why don't you want to talk about it? No, I don't want to talk about it. Right? And that would sort of be it.
The conversation was done.
Yeah, just that's it.
Done.
No negotiation. And really, that's the issue fundamentally on either side of the parental equation. From that standpoint, there was no negotiation when we brought something up, and there was no negotiation when they brought something up, which meant really there was no interaction, no relationship, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there was no relationship. I was either I was, and when my mother was being overly complicit or solicitous, I was absent. I just
sure it is a kind to be overly compliant with someone is to evacuate their personality. It is a very passive form of aggression.
And I was and I was absent, which is what happened every time we went over for dinner, because they tried to make sure that we had food that we liked, and again, just making sure that everything was perfect, or trying to make sure that everything was perfect, when really all we really wanted
was to chat with them. And that going for the appearance of a relationship is very important, right? Your parents are in no way abusive, right? I mean, that's sort of an important thing to understand for the listeners, right? That this is not. I mean, my childhood was a bit more rough and tumble, but your childhood was not in the way that in the way that far too many people's childhood was not abusive in that way. And as adults, they weren't. They don't put you down. They don't. I mean, your mom can be critical about little things like you'll wear a lipstick on Sunday, and why don't you keep a coat in the car for when it's cold, and why don't you gain some weight, and why don't you cut your hair? I mean, there's that kind of constant stream of irritating little corrections.
Yeah. Have you eaten today? It's like, how old am I? 5?
Right. And so there is that sort of little niggly kind of naggy stuff. But certainly there's some of the stuff that's posted on the board with regards to why people are DeFooing or getting rid of their family of origin, ceasing to see them, is, I mean, some pretty horrendous stuff, right? Some history of some real abuse. You've got a guy who's currently going through the process, who's got a family member who's not only a military woman, not a Marine, but a Marine policeman, right? So very, very sort of self-consciously tough, and this is the family that called the cops on this guy when he tried to defoo. There is nothing like that in your family's history and family situation. There was just a profound rejection of any kind of connection, any kind of two people in the same room, both having opinions, both talking.
Yeah. Two people, yeah, exactly, and not saying anything.
But it was a whole lot of nothing. Sorry, what are we looking for next?
County Road 43.
Got it. So yeah, there was a whole load of nothing going on, but what they really did work with was the appearance. They worked very hard to have the appearance of a relationship, right? So we would come over and the food would be laid out and everything would be good, and they would, they would pour us some wine and they would ask us about our week, and, there was a lot of that sort of stuff. Very much the appearance. They worked very, very hard on the appearance of gracious hosting and concerned parents, and, they'd hug and they'd kiss and so on, right? So this is what was tough about all of this sort of stuff.
It is really tough. It is really tough because it was hugs and kisses and we love you and oh, how are you doing, and come and eat and let us break bread together, and it was really deceiving.
And they pack up food for us to go. I mean,
take food with you to go, and
my God, we're so bad. What have we done? I'm sorry, we're going to have to change course. We're going to
the airport. We're going to the airport.
Right. No, it is a very difficult thing. It's very deceiving, right? Because there is this very strong commitment to the appearance. To yes, we had Christina and Stefan over for dinner, and we cooked them this, and we cooked them that, and we gave them some food to go, and we found out all their news, and blah 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 blah.
But that's all it was. It was a fact-finding mission. I mean, where did you go? What did you do? Who did you see? What did you talk about? But not, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? How did you feel when you were doing all these things? Nothing about the internal, the...
You could be anyone.
I could be anyone, absolutely.
I mean, and that's the fundamental problem with these kinds of form versus function, appearance versus reality family structures. You could have been anyone, and I could have been anyone. There was nothing personal or individual in the interaction. I mean, you are irreplaceable, right? I mean, as a wife, there's simply no possibility or chance in this world or the next that I could find anybody who would replace you as a wife. And for your parents, though, we were kind of interchangeable. Like, we weren't allowed to have opinions other than, the culturally acceptable ones of we have the opinion that Jesus is our Savior and parents are always wise and good. Right? So but we weren't really allowed to bring any individuality to it. So that's sort of the real challenge. And that's what I think is fundamentally irritating. And irritating is the wrong kind of word. It's just how we experienced it. It's irritating to have to spend time with people with whom it's simply all about the form, and it's not because, like, they want their daughter to come over, and daughter is like a category that's kind of empty. But as far as you as an individual goes, like, they never really asked about your work. They never really wanted to hear what was going on. I mean, they didn't mind hearing about some work troubles and so on, right? But as far as what you did, it was there was a big blank spot about you being a therapist that they just wouldn't process or would never talk about.
Oh no, I should have been a teacher, or I should have been a nurse.
Nice.
Something nice.
Something nice.
Something nice.
Not working with all these crazy people.
Right.
So yeah, that was a huge blank spot, and that's very hard, right? Sort of fundamental passion in life, what you've wanted to do since you were 15 years old, is just it's a persona non grata at the dinner table, right? It's like this. You simply can't discuss it or talk about it.
No, we couldn't really discuss or talk about anything, and that's why I would evacuate.
Right.
I would evacuate.
So yeah, I just sort of wanted to point out that's sort of a very subtle thing that's going on, and a lot of people who are going through this irritation or empty feelings when around family, I think what happens a lot of time is they look at really bad childhoods, right? And they'll say, well, my parents didn't beat me. My parents didn't yell at me. They didn't call me stupid. They didn't do this. They didn't do that. And, they cook me meals. They hug me. They do my laundry. They give me care packages. They whatever, right? They do all of these nice things. And people then, they detach themselves from overtly traumatic childhoods and say, well, that's not my family experience, and therefore my family is good, or is good enough, if that makes any sense.
Right, good enough. But amidst all of that, there are really obvious digs and really obvious abuses. If you really stop and think about it and look at it from different eyes, with a different perspective, you can see very clearly what those abuses are. And like I said, I wrote a letter. And
I'm so sorry. Yeah, I don't want to get to that. That's the more important thing than my
I just want to. Steph hasn't heard the letter, so he's hearing it for the first time as well.
So if I start sobbing,
I don't think you're going to sob, but I don't want to open the book and turn off the computer.
I think we're okay.
We're okay? So
Yeah.
I can rest the book on the computer?
No.
No.
No, just because the keyboard, something might happen to the recording software.
Okay. Well, it's going to take me a minute to find the letter.
Ooh, do you need some filler?
Yes, go right ahead.
Righty.
Oh, I found it.
Oh! Fillers interrupt us. Dang, I hate it when that happens. All yours, baby.
We're still looking for County Road 43.
I am.
Okay. But it's pretty colors.
It's lovely up here.
Very pretty. We're in the country. All right. Dear Mamba, I received your letter this week. I was afraid to open it. I feared so many things. It pained me to read it. I realize that it is nearing 2 years since we last saw each other. I am amazed by that. I think of you every day. I wonder how you are. I wonder what you're thinking and what you're saying to yourselves about my absence. I'm not unfeeling or uncaring as you might perceive me to be. It has never been my intention to hurt you or punish you. It is only because I've been hurt and mistreated that I felt it necessary to distance myself from you. Having read your letter, I was painfully...
Painfully manipulated into feelings of guilt and self-loathing.
I was painfully disappointed.
Oh. See, this is why you don't want the florid writer writing your letters.
I was painfully disappointed to see that you have not realized this. 2 years have passed, and you still don't understand why I left you. I don't know that you have even made any effort to find out by trying to understand your own actions toward me. I believe this because of the contents in your letter. You blame me for Ma's depression, and then you insult me by suggesting that I have no feelings.
Should I keep going 7 West?
Yes.
All right. Sorry, go ahead, sweetie. It's okay to feel.
It's okay. No, sorry. The computer was falling off my legs when you made that
that's
turn.
no good. Okay. It's okay to feel that the computer's falling off your legs, too.
I believe this because of the contents of your letter. You blame me for Ma's depression and then insult me by suggesting that I have no feelings. Quote, can you find it in your heart? You try to use guilt to make me act. Ma did this earlier this year when she called to insist that I attend at your surgery. The only message I received from your correspondence is how badly I've hurt you. There is never any credible admission of your responsibility on your part or any genuine curiosity about why this has all happened.
And I'm so sorry, and I don't mean to interrupt, but I just for the clarity of people who might hear this at some point, and without going into even remote details, there was a precipitating moment in your relationship with your parents where a grave difficulty that we were experiencing with extraordinary coldness and unsympathy, or lack of sympathy, on their part, and that really was the precipitating, unbearable moment.
And I think actual cruelty.
I think that's right. Really narcissistic kind of self-involvement on the part of your parents during a rather extreme crisis within our own lives. That really was a precipitating moment within that. That's sort of what you're referring to. That there was a real, very powerful cruelty and kind of kicking you when you were down around a particular issue, and that was what propelled you into finding your relationship with your parents unbearable.
Right.
And that's another reason why, without wanting to put people through what you went through, because that's, I mean, obviously not my power, but that's why I say to people, be vulnerable with your parents, right, so that you can see the level of care that they do or don't have for you, right? They're going through this automated kind of mechanistic, empty interaction is never going to give you the truth about your relationships. You have to be vulnerable. You have to be clear with people. And that was, in hindsight, obviously, we can see that that's what happened, that there was an extraordinary degree of vulnerability on both of us, but more particularly on your part during this crisis, and your parents' lack of concern and lack of care for you as an individual, and narcissistic and cruel self-involvement became very clear, which wasn't clear when we were chatting about who did what in the Greek community.
Right. So what I've realized in the past 2 years and in the year leading up to our last conversation is just how manipulative and self-centered you are. You claim that you would do anything for your children, but nothing is for your children. It's all for you, your needs, your desires, your self-image. Sadly, I don't believe you will ever understand this about yourselves. I can't and I won't subject myself to your narcissism and will not allow myself to be susceptible to your guilt. Since this is how you operate, we have no relationship. Leave me alone. Each time you try to contact me, you only make it worse for yourselves because it's more and more obvious to me how you operate and what your end goals are. I can't read my own writing. You draw less sympathy from me each time. And that's where I sort of ended the letter.
Right, so when you get these, there is the initial blow, right, which is awful, right, because they know which buttons to push, right? They're parents and they're your parents, right, so they know what has worked. There's been a very strong ecosystem of guilt that's been put together, which has given them, like, you're nothing but a big series of buttons to them, right? And I always believe that is forever going to be the case with parents. It's one of the reasons we have to get them out of our lives, because if they're hurtful or harmful, because we will forever and totally and always be completely susceptible to their power. So when you get the letter, sure, you feel afraid. And that's one of the things that I've talked about in podcasts, right?
I was extremely terrified. I get the letter. I don't want to open it. I made the mistake once of opening their letters when stuff wasn't around, and that, of course, resulted in problems between us because I became dissociated. I became...
I sort of had to dive into the water to pull you out again, so to speak.
Right. So I see the letters now as real threats to my integrity. And so I see it. It terrifies me. In fact, I actually had Steph read the letter to me. I was hoping that it wasn't going to be written in Greek so that he actually could.
I think I would have been able to translate it either way. Because the letters, they do have a depressing kind of similarity to them.
Yes.
Right? I mean, it's all... And do you mind did you have some other... I had a couple other comments about the letter, but if you have other stuff you want to say...
No, that's essentially it. I mean, at this point, because I've written several of these letters over the course of the last 2 years, this one was shorter and more succinct, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, no, it is. And I think that you certainly are reaching a kind of closure with your parents, which, of course, does take a long time.
It doesn't, that's the one thing I do want to emphasize, that this doesn't happen overnight. It's been 2 years. Their letters still terrify me. They still cause me to become tearful and feel guilty and want to pick up the phone and call them and say, I'm sorry. I just have to, I'm very lucky. I have staff who can help me through this and pull me out of it, and I have my own training and experience. But even with my own training and experience, I just want to emphasize, it is hard.
Right. It is very much like a drug, right? I mean, the withdrawal from a drug can be solved very quickly by just taking the drug again, right? And the pain that your parents are causing you can very quickly be solved by just giving them a call, right? That will immediately eliminate the feelings of guilt and pain that your parents are causing you with this kind of communication, right? So the release from the pain and the guilt and the fear, and to some degree even the underlying anger, the release from that is like a split second away. One phone call and you're done.
Right.
Right. So that's the great temptation. You're quitting heroin or something. It's like, oh man, just one more and I'll be fine.
Right. The problem, though, is not a problem. Maybe it's a problem. I don't know. What would happen, though, if I did pick up the phone and call them is that it would be my fault. It would be an admission that it is my fault that I've done these, or even if I said it wasn't my fault, they would still try and make it into my fault. You've done this. How could you? It's been 2 years. Welcome back. We're glad to have you. But no discussion of what happened or why this happened or...
and we've talked about this, that if some evil occurrence did happen and we ended up being back in their lives, which is unimaginable, but there would be drops, hints dropped from time to time. Like the 2 years where you went a little crazy. The 2 years, and there would be reference to it made from time to time.
Yes, and there would be fear. And there would be fear that I would do it again, and they would be overly solicitous.
There would be even more
again.
compliance, followed by more nagging, followed by more apologies, and you basically would be within your family handled like a radioactive and unstable form of gelignite that could blow up for no reason whatsoever at just about any given time. And you would really be handled with kid gloves, which would also be completely maddening, because it would then be a constant communication that you are unstable, but because they love you, you're kind of like a kid with schizophrenia, right? Your parents will absolutely do this, that, and the other to be with you with the full recognition that you are volatile, completely irrational, and that they have to tread with the kid gloves, they have to walk with unbroken glass around you.
Absolutely. Anyway, I have nothing further. If you have anything more that you want to talk about.
Maybe we should just take a pause here and try and figure out where we're going, because I'm not entirely positive that we're, on the verge of getting there. So I'll pause
I think we
this for
passed
now,
it.
and we'll sort it out.